Hi, all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer based in Charleston, South Carolina, who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is supported by CharlestonAddress.com and Realtor Ariel Trush. As most of you know, I am based in Charleston, South Carolina, a land of beaches, marsh, and groves of live oak trees. But navigating the right place to live if you do decide to be here is a toughie. Our waterways provide a natural division of experiences, so living on Sullivan's Island is much different than, say, living out by the plantations in West Ashley, for example. And with the price of residential real estate here hovering around $225 a square foot, choosing wisely is imperative. Ariel Trush of CharlestonAddress.com can help you do that. She's lived in Charleston for 30 years and routinely lists some of the most impressive properties in the region. She's one of those people that fell in love with the Lowcountry while in school here, and she's never left. She loves going out to eat, finding that new perfect dinner spot, and then enjoying a Lowcountry sunset on the drive home. Basically, it's simple. She loves living here, so she wants you to as well. And she's all about service and matching the right houses to the right clients as part of the Carolina One real estate family. She has lots of resources at her fingertips. She has experience, and she has the knowledge you need if you're ready to move. Check Ariel out at charlestonAddress.com to get started, and let her know that I sent you. Now, it's time to delve into the hidden world of high-stakes catering with two Charleston celebrities. Siblings Matt and Ted Lee grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, and when they left to attend colleges, they so missed the foods of their hometown that they founded the Lee Brothers Boiled Peanuts Catalogue, which was a mail-order catalog for Southern pantry staples. When an editor of a travel magazine asked them to write a story about food in their home state, they embarked on a second career as journalists. And that's where I got to know them, through their written words in Food and Wine, the New York Times, and of course their cookbooks. At this point, I've gotten to know them personally as well, and despite their fame in the writing world, they have revealed themselves to me as the people I had imagined them to be. Gracious, inclusive, eternally curious, and each of them with a distinctly individual wit. They lift others up in the profession in many ways, including an intensive annual cookbook camp. So I'd want no better guides into the private world of catering, which we can all get in their first nonfiction book called Hotbox, just out. I sat down with them to chat the stories behind the making of this book, and the first entailed them actually working in catering. That's just the beginning. Welcome to the Southern Fork, you two.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So excited to finally be here with you here at my new home away from home when I'm at home base in Charleston, South Carolina.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Ohm Radio has done some amazing things here in the community. And right now they are allowing me to record here. So we're in the middle of the workshop. We are also snacking this morning on some mezcal chocolate cheesecake from Will Lacey of Driftwood Pantry. How is this coming in at 1:30 in the morning? You feeling the chocolate in your veins?
Perfect breakfast, sort of like uniting the mezcal I had on the plane last night. No, not really.
Not really. I mean, what airline are you flying if they've got mezcal service?
Aeromexico.
So that everybody can keep up with whose voice is who, will you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Matt. I'm the older Lee brother.
And I am Ted. I'm the younger, taller Lee brother.
And you, Ted, live in New York.
That's correct. I live mostly in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in West Ashley.
Yes. So, and I'm in Park Circle. So there we go. Now we
Cover
did
all
that.
the boroughs.
So I have been huge fans of you two for a decade or more. Been reading your work, been wanting to be your friend and weirdly stalking you until you started
It never
going,
got
well,
creepy.
we'll have to.
Yeah.
It got a little creepy, but
We
thanks for
love
not
stalkers.
saying that. But
Thanks for reading our stuff.
of course, but you have a new thing a new book just out that I'm so excited to read. It's not a cookbook. Tell us about it.
So this, about 5 or 6 years in the making, is our first nonfiction book, just writing 300 pages. And it's all about the catering industry in the nation, but most especially in New York City. And it's a long story. We'll tell parts of it here, but
And
we
we
couldn't
know you're
resist.
thinking, wait, catering? Isn't that like rubber chicken? Why would I be interested in that? But we were lucky enough to actually observe a catering team in action. It was a friend of a friend and his two best guys who, were chefs and working a kitchen that was really challenging. And we were just impressed with the way they comported themselves was a lot different from the restaurant chefs we've encountered.
Even their vocabulary, like their strategies for cooking, their tools, like they use sheet pans, like
Yeah,
no
tell
restaurant
us
chef
about
you've
that,
ever seen.
That was a tidbit
They were
that
just
was
very
really
quiet
fascinating.
on the one hand,
Yeah.
but very explosively improvisational.
Like
it was clear
everything-
that they were not restaurant chefs. This was something else entirely.
Everything about them was sort of anonymous and impressive. Like the way they walked into the kitchen, the way they carried themselves was very like anonymous. No tattoos, no statement hair, no statement frames. It was just like
No
Generic-
tweezers.
Generic uniforms, generic backpacks, generic
No
equipment. Their knives were not special, and they had never seen them. They were cooking Stephen Satterfield's food,
Hey, Stephen.
and they had never
at the James Beard House.
at the James
Right.
Beard
In
House.
New York
They
City.
had never seen the menu or any of these dishes before they arrived at 4:30 p.m. for dinner that night. They had never cooked in the James Beard House. They had never been to Miller Union, and yet they rocked it. Like they cooked, Stephen Satterfield and Justin Burdett's food, to a fairly well, and it
5
was
courses.
super impressive. And Justin kind of worked the perimeter, and Stephen was on the other side of the pass, kind of like plate
Expediting.
wiping and expediting, and that
It was just
And
seamless.
Yeah.
Afterward, we took them out for a beer and we just like grilled them. Like, who are you? How do you do this? Why are you using sheet pans like skillets? And they just kind of like let us into their world. And more specifically, Patrick Phelan, the executive chef at one of the top 10 catering firms in New York City, literally invited us into his world and made it possible by hiring us.
Right.
Not
so,
as journalists fly on the walls, but we had to work.
Right. So did you have to wear the tuxedo pants and because that's the Southern way, the tuxedo pants, the really bad bow tie.
This is not
thing.
cater waiters. This is kitchen assistant, fiesta chef.
So we
Love it.
were fiesta chefs, and that's the thing is the thing that came to mind when they walked in the James Beard House was like, this is culinary special ops. Like these are the special forces you bring in, and it was like, wait, we want to join the forces because anytime you hear about catering in the culture, it's usually in reference to cater waiters.
Yes.
The
Party
sort
down.
of
Right.
Did you see that show Party Down?
Jane
on
Lynch.
Right.
You know,
right.
But that's
it's so
strictly about the
funny.
waiters, which is like a whole separate like province of the party.
Right.
And being home cooks, we're just home cooks and cookbook authors. We develop recipes for 8, 12, maybe 16. But we wanted to go into the special ops environment and see what it was like to scale it up, like to really
700,
700,
1,700,
800.
4,400 people. How do you
Single
serve
plated? Not buffet
restaurant
style.
Not buffet style.
not buffet.
So think about this. These are the stresses that the typical catering chef endures that no restaurant chef has to. Large volumes, serving the same thing more or less simultaneously. Like, how do you drop 4,400 plates of the same thing within a 15, 20-minute window?
Right.
And
right.
so it's a totally different ballgame. And it's
It
insane
is.
to watch them work. It's so cool.
That's what was so funny after that James Beardhouse event. We were, getting beers afterwards with Steven and Justin, and everyone was just like, "Oh my God, that you crushed it!" And they were like, "You don't understand. That was 80 covers. We don't sweat until it's 800."
Wow.
And
yeah.
that was really what got us.
And so
into-
it just
into that.
captured your imagination, and you were able to see
Yes.
it because you were cooks and you understood what you were looking
Yeah.
at.
Well, total innocence in this
Right.
world. I mean, kind of like,
And-
Dante's Inferno. But the other thing that we learned early on is the Hotbox. And by the way, that's the title of the book. The reason for that is the Hotbox makes restaurant quality food possible in a catering setting, which means anywhere, in food in appropriate spaces. And
because
the
these
reason for
guys
that,
are sometimes building kitchens before they cook.
Exactly.
Right. And they're fueled by sterno, like jellied alcohol fuel. Like, because in New York City,
That
you
smell
cannot
alone
bring
permeates.
propane tanks. Propane's forbidden in New York City since the 1980s. So
Wow.
anywhere else in Charleston, you just, hire Duval Events, and they will back up a nice clean box truck with 2 propane powered ovens on it if they
Right.
need to do 700 people.
Right.
And everything is more or less at ground level. In New York City, everything's vertical, and you're talking 19th century elevators and 19th century electricity. So you cannot plug in an electric oven, which are available to
Right.
rent for $400 a night. But no, in New York, it's sternos and inside these sort of bland, prosaic aluminum cabinets with nothing in them, just like sort of rails for sheet pans. And they use them as transport for the material on the way to the site, and then they're turned into ovens, and then they're turned into refuse wagons.
And they're basically, we should dial back and say the learning process of this was really joining the team and understanding, like, first we had to learn that most catering done at this level is done in 2 stages. There's a prep,
Right.
there's a prep shift, there's a prep
Right.
kitchen that prepares all the material in food and everything that's
Beverage,
going to be shipped to the
platters,
site
rentals.
that afternoon at 3:30. And then it's going to land at the site and be finished on site. So there's this sort of like cooking interruptus.
Right,
You cook
right.
it to like 85%, everything to 85%.
And
then you-
chefs listening to the show, they know that from being
from
in the
doing
kitchen.
events.
But
Yeah.
you can hold it doing events, or also, you're going to parboil something, or
Sure.
you'll sous vide and then sear it
and then you'll
off or
finish
something.
it. Right. So there's a bit of that in line cooking,
Right.
sort of preparing your mise en place. So this is like mise en place plus a traveling circus.
Well, and just being forced to give it your best shot. Remember, these are like important events. Everything is on the line. It's a wedding. It's, the annual gala, like the longevity of the nonprofit is at stake. There's some pretty
And the
important things going down
longevity
in
of
New
the
York
company,
City.
it's very competitive.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
sure.
you mess up one time,
Yeah,
you're
just
not
every
rehired by that
marketing
person
event.
or any of their friends that were there.
But so imagine, let's go back to the restaurant chef, because she or he is in her comfort zone, his or her comfort zone. They've got their mise en place. They're in their, best performance space, and it's dialed in, and they're there night after night. What if at 4 p.m. you showed up to a new venue that was almost always going to be different and had to make something of that?
Right.
And
Right.
what if you forgot to bring some important tool like a whisk? What do you do in that situation? And expectations are sky high, but the conditions are miserable, like terrible, especially in New
Because
York.
most of the venues weren't created to be venues. in New York. A lot of them like predate, like the Frick Museum, for example. That predates catering and the movable feasts. So you set up your kitchen in a hallway, or at
an elevator vestibule where they store the the wheelchairs.
Right. And so you have to sort of build, you come in with like brown craft paper, you cover, like you seal the whole place. I worked one event that was literally in someone's office. The kitchen was in someone's office. So we had to paper the entire place because, you have to protect the office and the carpet from everything.
So it's really like cooking ninjas. I mean, you're coming in, you're doing this really underground fast thing. There's no time for ego. There's no time for like screaming. Everybody needs to know their role.
Right. Yeah.
So you two as writers, you just were fascinated by this and you committed to that fascination before you even knew, while you were writing other things, raising families, working together, long distance on books and traveling, lots of traveling. Yeah. You committed to saying yes to this research that you didn't really know what was going on. And it wasn't like you were Googling. You're like up at 2 a.m. packing plates into a tractor trailer. I mean,
on the one hand, it represented a kind of commitment we hadn't taken on before. And we did have to maintain our freelance lives besides. But on the other hand, it was kind of like a fresh new challenge. We were really excited by it. It was something we could imagine doing for 3 years. And furthermore, we were getting paid $10 an hour in the prep kitchen. When does a freelance writer ever get paid for what they do?
I know, exactly. You're like, maybe I should just do this.
Right.
Like,
I mean, think about, it was that, that energy. It's hard to describe that energy, but it was sort of like that first day of school energy. Like, I'll never forget the terror and the excitement of my first days in the prep kitchen, because it really was that kind of thing where you were just messing up all the time.
Where is the aluminum foil?
And you had to ask.
And there's nothing worse than asking a question like, where is something, when
everyone is in their own zone.
Right.
You have 25 chefs.
Yes.
Everyone's in their own zone.
So you're kind of sulking around going, can I see what I need?
And then, I burned the prunes. There was a million
There were a lot of
things.
fails.
There were so many fails.
Blood was spilled.
But
but in the end, you build that confidence, and then you reach a nice
and
plateau
then
where you kind of know everyone's name, and you know what's expected of you.
And you sort of had to prove yourself. I mean, there were some trials by fire, but there's a prep shift and a fiesta shift. Most chefs who work prep don't work into fiesta because you've worked from 7 a.m. until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And just to roll into a prep shift a fiesta shift is not safe. The fiesta is the party.
Right.
Prep is the prep. And so you sort of had to prove your mettle in the prep to get to fiesta.
We throughout the entire process of writing the books, like 4 or 5 years, we struggled to sort of define what type of chef, what type of person chooses this world.
Yes.
A world defined by invisibility on the one hand, like you don't get any James Beard Awards doing this. And furthermore, you're usually behind a black curtain laboring, but also that kind of spiky demand. Like it's not spread out over the whole evening, a bell curve like in a restaurant. It's like this one cataclysmic, like all or nothing.
Right.
Like,
you've got
we
10
need to
minutes,
get 1,400 salads out there, and we don't have more than 5 minutes to do it. So there's a lot of Ethel and Lucy on the assembly line kind of moments like, oh shit, I'm just
and going back
here.
To another interesting thing about this business, and the reason why we were able to do it and juggle our other commitments, is that it thrives on this sort of mercenary, like independent kind ninja kind of thing, where most kitchen assistants, we were KAs, kitchen assistants, most of them will work for 2 or 3 different firms, and they'll just schedule in, because each firm in New York, they may have 2 parties a night, they may have 4 parties a night, but it's an accordion business. So one night there's maybe a dinner for 12 and a cocktail party for 150 downtown, and then the next night there will be a party for 800 and another party for, a sit down dinner. And, so there's this constant need for labor that's very, expandable and contractable. And you sort of have to be nimble enough to know, who's doing the hiring. And we mostly were with one firm, but it was interesting where we would have a commitment that was like a month long, so we'd be out of pool. And we'd constantly be getting like, "Hey, can you guys work? Can you guys work?" And the booker would be calling, yeah, and
got a big weekend.
And then
all hands on deck.
I only did it twice. Once I came back from freelance writing, I did it twice here, and I was bartending, and I still get calls. And finally, I was like, "Please take me off your list. I'm invited to that party.
Right.
I cannot bartend."
But it's funny because then you get a space, and you're like, "Oh man, I really want to roll into a party. Like, do you have anything?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're slow right now. It's January. We got nothing." And it's like, damn.
Yeah, because it is an adrenaline rush.
You hear about a party that was really that was going to be really spectacular.
I've got a question for you to ask us.
Yeah.
Which your bar thing reminded me is ask us, were you ever spotted?
I should ask that. Were you ever spotted? I didn't even think about that.
We on a couple occasions, Ted was working a party out in the Hamptons where Martha Stewart was there, and we had written her wine column in the magazine for 7 years.
Yes. Been on her show
with her. But she, in general, people can't see you if you're dressed as a kitchen assistant. As you know, a lowly kitchen assistant with an ill-fitting chef's coat and like smudged black clogs and black pants and a beanie,
it's
and
a
you look like every other kitchen drone.
It really is.
Like they don't want to see you. They don't want to connect with you or your eyes. And so
and there's power in that goes both ways. That was originally something that sort of frustrated me. It was like, why can't these party goers just, because that was a party where there were action stations, so it was a very rare occasion for a kitchen assistant to be on the floor of the party. That never happens.
And action stations, for those that are outside the business, that would be like carving roast beef or doing some kind of pasta bar or omelet station. Yeah, I was like mashed potato bar, but what is that?
A crepe, doing a crepe station to order. This was actually a burger station. So we were grilling burgers on outdoors in the Hamptons, and so I was on the grill, and then I'd be passing them to the server team who would be assembling them and putting them on plates. And but you really don't, you're not seen, which is great because your role is not to be there as who you might be inside, but just as that worker who can grill burgers.
Right, as a factory.
We never quite got to the place, I don't think, by the end of the project where we were comfortable with the fact that there's this huge disconnect in our home kitchens. Like, we get to, labor on the food and present it, and our guests get to eat it and enjoy it, or our family, and we do as well. And so you see that result.
You get that payoff.
The conclusion,
right.
The satisfaction, almost immediate gratification, really.
Right.
I mean, you can prep a day ahead, but still, you don't have to wonder what's going to happen to your food. Yeah. In catering, you need to get comfortable with that, interrupt us, because you may never see the person who eats your food.
And on the other side of that, I think that's what the attraction for the rise of the celebrity chef, the rise of knowing who's writing your wine column for Martha Stewart, is because we want, as diners, to see who is making that food. It's a very essential human connection. It's very intimate.
It rips the rug out from under the meaning of food. To us, the meaning of food is everything. We worry that and sweat that and write about it and study it.
And that was the hardest thing for me in the prep kitchen was, I would just, from my production chef, I'd be given a task, take this case of carrots and peel them. And that might be my only job on those carrots. And then I would be, someone else would take those and blanch them or cut them or whatever. And the dissociation between task and result is something that we completely take for granted in our home kitchens when we're complaining about how much work it is.
Right.
Imagine if I would see people, trimming, cutting the silver skin off the tenderloins, hundreds of pounds, having no
5
idea
hours straight.
Well,
where
and
that
you
was going.
lose it's that repetitive thing. You lose what you're actually, I'm cutting the outer thing of a piece of pork that
Yeah.
used to be. I mean,
Right.
you're also losing the idea of what you're
the
doing. You're
context.
just
And it's interesting. I mean, there is a satisfaction in the repetition and all that kind of stuff. But for us who want to see a story, it's so complicated and interesting. But I mean, catering is usually in the context of a celebration, and so there's a
That's
reason why.
especially why it's so frustrating, because this is not just like a Tuesday night dinner.
Yeah.
This is like,
Right. But
and you're like, look, I made these carrots for you.
exactly, it's like
Congratulations with these carrots.
congratulations on your wedding. I peeled the carrots exactly for the carrot cake or whatever.
Right.
Also, there's major celebrity factor in this book, by the way, because it is New York City and it is a luxury product. Ultimately, catering is there,
Right.
certainly in New York. In fact, very few weddings go down in New York because it's so damn expensive. Where the average wedding in the United States as a whole is about $37,000. In New York, it's $75,000.
Right.
And on the whole, of any type of event, weddings, corporate functions, bar mitzvahs, whatever, the average New York catered event costs about $500 to $1,000 per person. When you add in lighting, rentals, all that stuff.
Right.
Flowers.
So, just don't get involved. If it's a 12-person dinner for the trustees or whatever, it's going to be about $12,000.
Right.
You just
because
don't
you have
bring
to
a
mass-
box
you have
truck and the labor of 30 people and these fine ingredients.
You have to summon so many resources.
But then think about that, what that does to the expectations. Like, if this thing is costing $1,000 per person, the
Right.
food
That's
can't be
exactly
rubber
what I was
chicken.
gonna say. Yeah.
It can't
Right.
suck. It can't
Right.
There
suck.
was a time when you could probably get away with that, but now it's not really possible.
As they move the needle forward.
First of all, no event director would choose chicken because they know that it has that.
Rubbery
We
quality.
talk about that. We in the book we talk to event direct. I mean, we talk to everyone in the process because we got in as kitchen assistants. $10 an hour prep kitchen assistants, and moved on to Fiesta, $25 an hour.
And that was a fiesta for a
and sometimes
freelancer
a lot
for
of
sure.
time overtimes. Yeah.
Exactly. And what
We have whole chapters on party rentals, for example. We began to, as we got more comfortable in the labor part of it, we started interviewing people like Danny Meyer and Liz Newmark and people who were at the forefront of catering back in the 70s and 80s, and then also piecing together the history. Because in the 1950s, when James Beard was a caterer, he specialized in hors d'oeuvres. You never did an event at the Temple of Dendur in some dusty museum. It was just not seemly. Like, you did it at the banquet hall at the hotels,
Right.
or at the Yale Club or whatever, or at the church parish hall. You did it in some place where there was a real kitchen, and because it just wasn't possible. And then we discovered there are a few key people, mostly
they're
failed actors,
fascinating
who
people.
created this theatrical way of doing parties where they would take it to wherever you are. And it was just a short step from your apartment to, a tent out in the park, in Central Park. And
So
from
that
there,
leads me to ask you, after your time as KA, when you're going back into your home kitchen, what trick?
what's the takeaway?
What's
Yeah,
the
the
takeaway
takeaways
back into the
are
kitchen?
so amazing.
There's some really cool
So-
tools and cool ideas and cool strategies that we
Do you think that they're
will
incorporating
affect our
into your
cooking.
methods and cooking
Absolutely.
and
Like,
writing moving forward?
I was always afraid of holding food in my previous entertaining life, and so I was constantly working during the party.
Yes, which
And-
is no fun.
Which is no fun. It's not fun for you. It's
No,
not fun for your
that's why I
guests.
always make a
It's-
punch.
And it doesn't produce better
stresses them
food
out.
either.
And it doesn't produce better food. And so, like,
and they are there to be with you.
Definitely make the
and
short
you're in
ribs
and
2
out.
days ahead of time.
yeah.
Oh
no.
my goodness!
And,
right.
there obviously there are critical control points where you have to be attentive to how long you're holding whatever at what temperature. But that becomes the interesting thing in catering is that becomes sort of, instead of sort of like an intellectual thing, an intuitive thing.
Right,
It's just like you know what's safe, what's not safe just by what you absorb. And that was the interesting thing at the beginning of it. We were like, oh my gosh, catering, it's so scary. Like, you have so many people, but everyone's a professional. And they've all absorbed that through their experience in the field. So they know what's safe and what's not.
It also sort of breaks you out of the gearhead sense of home cooking where you think that, the sharpness of my knife is critical and
Like
I need the right tools.
Right. Alton Brown's always
and
calling it the unitasker.
Yes.
Right.
honestly, like these caterers can do almost anything with a sheet
Anywhere.
pan, plastic wrap, aluminum foil, and a sterno. Like,
It's big picture. It's like bringing back into the home a sense of confidence and also simplicity and editing. Like as an entertainer, I'm always over committing to ambition. And when you work at a party, you realize that a lot of time trips you up. And there's so many examples of parties we worked where, the number of hors d'oeuvres was simply not practical for the room we had to prepare them in. And that's where you can really trip up a catering team if you're planning a party, and you can do it at home. Just maybe refine your ambition so that, what's an example? I recently did a party where I went
here's
against
an example.
my own. I wanted to do cornbread and biscuits to order.
Yeah, no.
No, nobody cares.
Not to that
like,
level.
No.
A
Don't
cold
do it.
biscuit is delicious.
It's totally fine. And it was like,
Or at least room temp, But that idea of, as home cooks, and that idea of easy entertaining is something that I think comes through a lot in your books. And that is that Charleston connection, that idea of entertaining and opening your home and providing that. But there is an elegant ease to your work. So I think when I read it, I go, I can do this. I can have some people over and have a nice flank steak with chimichurri and some blah, blah, blah,
Well, a large part of the mission when you're sort of speaking to home cooks or lending them a recipe or just encouraging them is demystifying the whole thing so they don't take it too seriously.
Yes.
I think in the catering experience, like what we had to learn or relearn was the value of planning. Planning, and having a method, and having that method be streamlined and simple and translatable to many of whom, did not speak English as a first language. And so, you have to build a culture around very clear food cooking strategies.
that
involve sterno.
Our food, whatever we know about food, came about from a relationship that started from growing up in Charleston.
Right.
And when you think about the way kids come to understand food in Charleston is very unique, and it's very story based. It's like you learn about mulberries from the mulberry tree at the Hazel Parker playground.
Right.
And you learn about
that
time
oysters
drop
don't
line.
grow on trees.
Right,
And
you do.
You learn how to shuck them at a very young age, and you learn where they come from, and you learn how to tie a drop line and catch a blue crab. And it's hard to sort of let go of that, craving that your food always tell the most amazing story.
Right.
And that is
There's
something
an
that
anchor
I
place.
find. Yeah, that anchor place. And in the context of catering, where you're trying to focus all the attention from the function is on the celebrant, right? It's a bride and a groom. It's a gala celebrating, another great year. It's a movie premiere. It's not about the story behind there's already this oxymoronic thing going on where it's
very
like,
interesting.
The food
to
is
think
there,
of.
and it's important, but we're only going to let you know that it's not really about the origin story and that kind of
It's not
So
the
you're-
centerpiece of the event.
Exactly.
Which in Charleston, it just is.
Kind of is, right?
Yeah.
So it's
We ended up making the story about catering, and we, I think turned over some rocks to find the story of how catering developed as this kind of performance art juggernaut that it is today.
And we should say in learning about the figures who were transformative in this sort of movable feast, like you can party anywhere.
Right.
And we'll come to you and we'll just build a kitchen. And there were two things we found that were in common with them. One was a guy named Donald Bruce White, who's really considered the forefather of this kind of entertaining in New York and catering. And he was a performer in the Army. So he was in USO shows as a song and dance man. And so he had the theatrical experience and the military, right?
So he understood that system.
That thing. And then another huge figure a generation later, this guy who just died, Sean Driscoll, who started a company called Glorious Foods. Same story. He was a song and dance man in the Army.
How
and he developed a
interesting.
catering business in New York that became,
The book begins with a quote from him, which is, "You're only as good as your last souffle."
Well, let's end on that, but I have to ask you the questions, the real
Yes,
end.
please.
And Hotbox is available nationwide.
Wherever
Nationwide.
books are sold.
Wherever books are sold. So, and you'll be doing a tour.
Yes.
And signing.
We're recording an audiobook for the first time. You don't do that typically with cookbooks, but we're excited.
Yes, that's weird. It's like 1/8 teaspoon, and somebody has to run it back. What was that again?
Right.
right. Just doesn't work.
Doesn't quite work.
Okay. What are you hungry for?
Breakfast.
Right now,
However you want to answer
a fried
that.
chicken biscuit.
Oh, I could go for a fried chicken biscuit myself. Yeah, that's a good answer. How do you think this work, the idea of somehow translating entertaining and culture and connection and cooking and all of this freelance writing defines you, says something about your personality? Besides the fact that you're a glutton for punishment.
I think it very clearly says that we're ADD or something like that, restless, and also hate delegating and administering people. Like, we're not leaders ultimately. Have a hard time.
Don't look for us for leadership. But if you want to, I would say that it all boils down to the fact that we're interested in every story about food is a story about people fundamentally. And
Yes.
it all comes back to that. And we're interested in the humanity in food.
And that is
from
what you're
every
putting
respect.
into the catering business with this book, is you're injecting the
Well,
humanity.
it was always there. We're just trying to
Shine
show
a
it to
light
other
on that.
people.
Yes.
And sometimes to the people themselves.
Yes. I love it. What keeps you up at night? What's the stress or the thoughts of?
Making a living.
I amazingly have that same keeping up at night thing too.
Yeah.
That whatever you did last was the last
It's
job
going to
you'll
end,
ever get. Yeah.
right? We
Yeah.
talk about that. Like I always say, "How do you know it's not going to end?" And Ted goes, "I don't."
I have 3 kids, so ice caps melting and us all boiling in fishless ocean
Yes.
keeps me up at night.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then this question that we all ask when we're sitting around, what is that death row meal or the last meal, before you have to eat Jell-O in hospice, and you're kind of that one that you can savor.
Do you want to go first? I know mine.
What is it?
Slow cooker, pork shoulder with a can of pickled jalapenos and carrots on top. Let it go for 8 hours.
I'm doing that tonight.
That's my jam.
Oh man, that sounds
That's
delicious.
my last meal for sure.
And what kind of white
Super
bread?
easy. No one has to
Hawaiian
work
rolls.
hard. No, tortillas over gas flame. Just like, yeah.
That's a weird technique, but I'll give it to you. I just, at the end of the day, I just want to eat salmon sashimi with good soy sauce.
That does sound good too. Well, on that note, if people want to learn more about the Lee brothers and their amazing portfolio of writing, from cookbooks to articles for Food and Wine magazine to wine columns from Martha Stewart Living, you can go to thesouthernfork.com. I'm going to have links there. You can also see pictures of them. If you click on those links, you might be able to intersect with them on their tour. And if you like what you hear, I'm so happy that Ted brought this up today. Food is all about people. And the Southern Fork has more than 130 different interviews with some of the best culinary makers in the business. So please dive into the archives wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, subscribe, all of those things. Tell your friend, listen to it on the treadmill so you can think about what you're going to eat. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Hello, and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. I've been thinking about something, and it has to do with my life, and I think probably a lot of our lives. We live in such a modern world, such a convenient world, that we're so used to everything being easy. And I think we forget that sometimes good things aren't easy. They take practice. I have a few examples here. One is, I recently took a group aerobic class, and y'all, I am not coordinated, and I was really, really behind, and yeah, it was tough, and I never wanted to go to that class again. And of course, if I just had owned it and gone for a few weeks, practiced those moves, I'd have them down. I just returned back from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I did a lot there, and you're going to be hearing about Charlotte a lot more in the coming weeks on this podcast. But while there, I was speaking and reading from a book that I wrote in 2006. This was part of an arts festival, and they had chosen my book as one of the official reads. I hadn't read this book in close to a decade. And when I opened it back up, I was a little embarrassed at the level of writing that I was writing in 2006. And I had to be okay with that before I said yes to speaking about it, instead of pushing it away, because I'm writing as a practice, and I've been practicing a lot more since 2006. And I would hope, and I think I am better today than I was back then. But it's also, practice is often public. It's in print. It is in the middle of an aerobics class, or, you're cooking and your friends are coming over and something doesn't turn out. And you have to say, I'm sorry, the pudding didn't come out. It's not edible. So when something isn't easy, lots of times that uneasy thing is in public. And I just want to remind all of us today, me included, I am right there in the trenches with you, that things that are well done are often difficult. And as I was editing this podcast, I was listening to both Matt and Ted Lee mention that when they started out as kitchen assistants, there were a lot of fails. Matt said their blood was spilled. Ted said that, they couldn't find anything in the kitchens, and he burned some prunes or ruined some prunes. And if they defined themselves just as cookbook authors, they could have said, well, this is crazy. What are we doing? We don't need to be writing this book. And they could have quit. But if they'd done that, they wouldn't have this book. And I would be sorry for that, because it's a great read. And it's also about the idea of saying yes and immersing yourself in a world that you don't know and learning about it so well that you can write about it. So think about practice today. If you do, I'm just asking you to. Sometimes it's embarrassing. Who cares? Just keep going. Be in the back of that aerobics class and just mess up. What's the worst that can happen? That you didn't try. So that goes for cooking. That goes for life. And I'm here to tell you, you can do it. You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations. But in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?